Continuing with lesson 5-6, and here's what's happening today. It is another pattern. Now, let me just briefly, before I start with the pattern for today, let me tell you that next week, tomorrow, actually, let me start, obviously we're not to next week yet. Tomorrow we are going to practice something that is not part of the chapter, but that will help with overall this work. I think somebody had asked earlier about divisibility rules. We're going to do that tomorrow. So it's just a little short thing that will help with some of what we're doing. Next week, Monday, we're going to review, and Tuesday you're going to have a quiz on 5-1 through 5-6. So just be prepared. Anything from the beginning up until now, if you have questions, make sure to let me know. So on Monday we review up to and including this lesson, and on Tuesday a quiz. Then we'll continue with chapter 5 after that. Okay, so squares of a binomial. Here's the idea. If you think of a binomial and squaring it, there's a pattern that goes with this. Now, let me just say, you don't need to write this, but you can just watch, that this means a plus b times itself twice, right? That's what squared means. You could, with the a plus b in there, or with numbers and letters and other variables, right? This is just the pattern that we use, the a's and the b's. You could write it side by side and FOIL it to get the answer. That will always work. However, we are looking for a pattern. And so let me show you what the pattern for this is. And part of what you're going to need to do, just like yesterday with difference of two perfect squares, we'll start by going forward with the pattern, and then we'll look at the result, and we'll need to go backwards with it to factor it. So that's why, although it would work to write it side by side and just FOIL it if you're doing this part of it, that won't help you when you need to go backwards. So I do need you to learn the pattern. So again, these are patterns that we're going to keep seeing. If you have two things in parentheses, so binomial, that are being added, and we want to take that binomial times itself, so a plus b to the power of 2, the pattern says that the result will look like this. We are going to be back to getting a trinomial answer from multiplying two binomials. And the pattern says that whatever's in the a position will get squared. In the middle, it's always going to be times 2 times the a and times the b. And then the third piece of the trinomial will always be the b squared. Now, I'm going to give you the second part of the pattern, and then we'll do some examples, and hopefully it will be clear very quickly. There is an almost exact same pattern for when there's a minus in the binomial. This would mean, again, if you wanted to write it side by side, a minus b times a minus b. Be careful, this doesn't mean just a squared and b squared. If we FOIL this, we're going to get a trinomial, and that's what we need to get from this. So the biggest mistake people make here is they just go, oh, the a is squared and the b is squared. This has a subtraction or an addition in it, which means it's not the same as the exponent rule we already learned. It's a little different. The pattern for this one, here's the good news, it's almost exactly the same. The only difference is this minus right here. If there's a minus in the binomial, the first sign, right, we don't have a sign in front of the a squared, so the first operation, I should say, is a minus. And everything else, including the plus at the end, is the same as the first pattern. So these are the two patterns. You can see they're almost exactly the same. If it has a plus in the binomial, both signs are addition. If it has a minus in the binomial, the first one is a minus, the second one stays a plus. So let me show you how you would do this, again, without FOILing. The idea here is we're going to skip the process of FOILing. So instead of a minus b, that's not what you're going to normally see. What about x plus 3 squared? Now again, you could write it side by side and FOIL it, but I want you to practice the pattern. The pattern says, okay, the first thing is going to be a squared. A is my first term. So what's the square of this first term? Mismo?
X to the power of 2.
Good, x squared. Now, here's what I like to do. I like to do the easy parts first. It's kind of a human thing, right? We want to do the easy stuff. So here's what I like to do. I like to skip to the back and do the b squared. My b in this case is 3. 3 squared, instead of writing 3 to the power of 2, tell me what 3 squared is.
9.
Right. Write it down. What I mean by that is x squared, we don't know what that is. I don't know x, so we have to keep it. But if it's just a plain number, give me the actual squared number. Now we just come back to the middle, and I go, okay, it's going to be a plus. When the binomial has a plus, all the signs are plus. And now the middle is 2 times a times b. 2 times x times 3. Now again, if you want to kind of write that off to the side, okay, we look at that. Well, that's not how I would write it. How would I end up writing this in the simplest way? 2 times x times 3, Janelle?
6x?
Yeah, exactly, 6x. Right, we would multiply the 2 and the 3, and then put the x after it. So I wrote it here on the side just so you can see where it comes from. You don't need to write it down, but you can if it helps. There's our answer. If we FOILed it, we would get the same thing. Let me do one more that has a minus. And let's put maybe a variable and a number here. So 7u minus 3 binomial squared. So again, the title of the lesson, square of a binomial. Here's the square of a binomial. So let's see if we can follow the pattern. Here's my a. The first piece is a squared. So what am I going to write for 7u squared? Let's simplify it. Mismo?
49u to the power of 2.
Perfect. Very good. 49. Don't forget to square the 7, and don't forget to square the u. And again, let's come to the easy part. B squared. Again, 3 times 3, 9. It's still a plus. It's always a plus. Think about this. If we were doing last, both of them would be negative. Negative 3 times negative 3. In the middle, because there was a minus, we need to have a minus here. 2 times a times b. Now again, if you want to write it down, 2 times my a times my b. Maybe writing it down helps you to see it and not forget any of the pieces. If you can do mental math and get it right, go ahead. But if you're not getting them right, then just take a second and write it down. What would the final answer for this be? Paula?
49u squared minus 42u plus 9.
Okay, good. 42u is that missing piece. 2 times 7 is 14, times 3 is 42. You can use your calculator, times u. So 49u squared minus 42u plus 9. There's our answer. If you follow the pattern, you don't need to FOIL. If you FOIL, you still need to follow the pattern for the next thing that you're going to do. Now here's what we're going to do. The instructions, we're going to go backwards, and we're going to decide, could a given trinomial, right? Here's a trinomial answer. If you are given a trinomial, you need to decide, could it be factored to have this as its 2 factors, right? Notice this is 2 factors. This is 7u minus 3 times 7u minus 3, 2 binomials. So we're going to look at a trinomial and decide, is it a perfect square? Meaning, is it the factors of square of a binomial? So the instructions will say something along the lines of, decide if the trinomial is a perfect square. And I'm going to show you 2 examples. I'll show you one that is and one that isn't so that you can see the difference. And then that's all we need to do for today. Now what I'm just writing, because I don't have it on the screen anymore, but you can see it on your own paper, so you don't need to rewrite this if you don't want to, but I just put the pattern underneath of what this should match with. The pattern, because it's a minus, tells me that this would come from squaring a binomial that also has a minus. Because there was a minus here, there would be one here. So we want to see, does this 4x squared, would that be some a squared? Could 25 be a b squared? And if so, is the middle term, here's the most important part, is the middle term the right result for 2 times a times b? So let's see, could this factor down to be the square of a binomial? 4x squared. If this is something being squared, what has been squared? What would, if this is a squared, what would plane a be? What times itself did I do to get 4x squared? Ariana?
2.
Good. 2x. Think about that. 2x times 2x, 4x squared. 25. That's a little easier. What did I square to get to 25? Patrick?
5.
Okay, good. Now, here's the test. We can't say yes, it works just yet. The final test is to test out this 2 times a times b using the a and the b that we just identified. 2 times my A times my B. 2 times 2 is 4, times 5 is 20. It should be 20x. Hey, 20x is what I have. The answer here, is it the square of a binomial? The answer is yes, and we're going to answer it with our square of a binomial. These are the factors. We just factored it. 2 factors. 2x minus 5 times 2x minus 5. So you write it down and you kind of go, okay, if this is a squared, what's my a? If this 25 is b squared, what's my b? And then the final check, does it have the correct 2ab? And now let me show you one that doesn't work so you can see the difference. All right, this one will look a little crazier, but don't worry, it's the same thing. It won't be so hard, I promise. 64u squared plus 72uv plus 81v squared. And again, I'm writing the pattern underneath. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. I'm just writing it so it's on the screen. Now we want to see, does this fit our pattern? If 64u squared is the a squared, then what does that mean my plane A would be? What times itself made 64u squared? Again, 64u squared is the a squared. I want to find the plane A. What times itself made this? Catalina?
8.
And?
8.
And?
Oh. Well, 8u, sorry.
Good. And you, right? 8u times 8u would make 64u squared. Okay. How about 81v squared? 9v. You can't even help yourself. The answer's popping right out. Now, here's the test we need to do. This looks good, but let me check. 2 times a times b. 2 times the a I identified, the a is 8u, and the b is 9v. If 2 times a times b matches what I had, then this is a yes. 2 times 8 is 16. Actually, wait a minute. I can't do mental math. I'm going to go the other way. 9 times 8 is 72. Uh-oh. 72 times another 2. That's not matching what I have. No is my answer. You have to check the pattern. It has to match. This could be the square of this, and this could be the square of this, but this middle piece is not 2 times a times b. Therefore, this one is not the square of a binomial. So you just answer no.